We're here live on Radio Row with Matt Barrows of The Athletic. Matt, thank you for a few minutes.
Thank you for having me.
You need to check out The Athletic. If you are a Niners fan specifically, Matt's coverage is among the best out there. If you listen to 49ers in 5, I'm always promoting Matt's articles, so it's nice to actually get to talk face to face.
And thank you for all the promotion. I mean, that's such a big help for everything that we do. Everything is subscription-based now, so the more the word gets out there, the better.
Sure. The big story this week, of course, is the practice field.
Yeah.
The 49ers publicly have been pretty good about kind of downplaying it. But what are you hearing privately? How upset are they with the conditions of the practice field at UNLV?
They were upset. I mean, steamed. And more so last week and early this week, I think they've reached a conclusion that, okay, this is the best we're going to be able to do, so we can't make a stink about it and make it awkward for the players. But they were very upset last week. I think in part because it was only recently that these fields went down.
Yes.
So they sent an advanced team, like they should have, to check out the practice field. There was nothing to check out at that point. It wasn't entirely in, and so when their big guns, we're talking Matt Greiner, their top groundskeeper, they're talking Ben Peterson, their top medical guy. When all those guys went out there over the weekend, they found it to be inadequate, substandard. And so that's when they started to make a stink. I mean, it got to the point where John Lynch made a special trip. John Lynch would have traveled with the team, made a special trip to Vegas to check it out himself, put on cleats, went onto the field. Again, this is way softer than we're used to. So they have been able to stiffen it up. I don't know what the right verb is, but they've gotten it to a point where it's a little bit harder than it was initially, and the 49ers have had to make do with it. But it was a big issue, to the point where they were threatening to attend Media Day on Monday and then head back to Santa Clara, practice there all week, and then come back for the game. I mean, it was an empty threat. They would have gotten fined out of the you-know-what.
Right.
But, I mean, it just kind of underscores how angry they were over the situation and how angry they are over the inequity of the two practice facilities. The 49ers, of course, practiced out there in August, so they know how nice that Raiders facility is.
That's right, yeah.
So it's not equal this week in terms of the practice.
When this happened, I said this is now an ownership level situation, because Kyle can complain and all of that, but Jed is the one that's going to have to complain to the league and really raise hell. Do you think he's done that, and do you think it will ultimately matter?
No, I think the die has been cast at this point. I mean, they're having their last practice today.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's at UNLV. But Jed got on the phone with Roger Goodell and said, this is, this is not fair, and we need to figure out a solution to it. I mean, this is just my assumption. I don't know whether this happened, but I think that Jed wanted Roger to go to the Chiefs, wanted to go to the Hunt family and say, listen, this is the situation at UNLV. We want to be able to use the Raiders facility too. Can you tweak your schedule around so that, it would accommodate us practicing as well? And I think that either the Chiefs were unwilling to do that, why give your opponent an advantage, and the league was unwilling to force the Chiefs to do that. The league's point is that, okay, we have a base test for this. This falls within the parameter of that, even though it's at the very low end of it. And you're just going to have to, you're being too picky.
They can't do that. They can't make the Chiefs move, because they do, then they're admitting that they messed up.
Yeah.
And they're not going to do that.
Right. It would have screwed up with the schedule, and I guess the schedule was a bigger deal to Kyle Shanahan than having the right hardness, firmness of field. So they were caught between a rock and a hard place, and so they've just had to sort of accept their situation.
You've been covering this team. You covered the team in 2019 at Super Bowl 54. Have you noticed a difference in the demeanor of Kyle Shanahan from Super Bowl 54 to now?
I can't say that I have. I mean, I know that he was upset over the field situation. I think he's done a good job of masking that publicly, and I think he wants to mask that from his players as well. because you don't want to make that a thing. That we're not going to be able to practice very well. How are we going to be prepared enough to play in this game? You don't want any sort of insecurity at this point. So pretty early on in the week, I guess it was on Monday, they started to sort of back off the public pressure to get something changed with the field. But he's been the same to me. I don't think he likes all the media stuff. That's why they did all the practices last week.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a bottom line to this whole thing. They did the bulk of their preparation in Santa Clara last week in anticipation of there being some sort of distraction this week, and they got it. Most of the hay was in the barn before they got on the plane to Las Vegas.
Jed, before he left, Jed is everywhere now. Jed's doing all sorts of interviews. Yeah. The idea of Kyle being on the hot seat if the 49ers lose this game was pretty much as brushed off as it could possibly be by Jed York. Do you think that would change if the 49ers lose, or do you think that we're in for the Kyle Shanahan show for the foreseeable future come hell or high water?
Yeah, I think it's hell or high water. I mean, that's not to say that there wouldn't be changes to a staff. I mean, if there's another defensive performance sort of up and down,
yes.
I could see Steve Wilks being dismissed and the 49ers going in a different direction there. It just seemed to have been a lot of markers in this season. There have been some fantastic play, but also some times where not exactly sure what's happening there. So this whole idea of not giving full effort.
Yes.
That's maybe a preseason conversation
right?
that you have to have with your players. It's very bizarre that they had to have that following the NFC Championship game. And I know it's not Steve Wilks. I mean, the defensive linemen were as guilty as anyone, and that's Chris Kosarek's realm.
True.
And that's his calling card. It's just this aggressive, frothing at the mouth defensive line. So, I mean, there's a lot of blame to go around for that, but the buck ultimately stops on defense with Steve Wilks.
If the Niners win, do you think Wilks will be back?
I think so. I mean, my sense is that anytime you have a change at defensive coordinator that we saw earlier this year, there's some growing pains, and if you've got a guy that's spent a year in that position, he's going to be better in year two. So he's not going to have that in the booth, out of the booth.
Right.
What did the 49ers like to call? All of that awkwardness of this season would be gone if he's back next year.
I feel like Fred Warner has really he's not the defensive coordinator, but I feel like he has really taken a leadership role. He supposedly is, the driving force behind Will coming down from the booth. How much input do you think he has on their game plan and what they're doing on defense?
I agree with you. I don't think you can overstate Fred Warner's role on this team, not just middle linebacker. I mean, he's going to be speaking today at the podium, the same thing that Brock Purdy did yesterday. So you have the coach, and then you have a major player, and Fred Warner is the voice of the defense. So he speaks for the defense. He rallies the defense all the time. I went into the locker room last year, and I did that story from inside the locker room, and he's still kind of whirling and talking and coaching and doing all those things you see in pregame. He's doing that at halftime too, so it never shuts off with him. So I mean, he's really an MVP of this team. Does a lot of things behind the scenes that nobody sees.
What do you think it would do for Kyle's legacy to win the Super Bowl?
I mean, it cements it. You think of all of his accomplishments to this point. The winning record, all the trips to the playoffs, the fact that, I don't know what the number is now, but so many offenses around the league either have a head coach or an offensive coordinator that's worked for Kyle at some point. I mean, he's up there. He's almost at the top. He's almost at Andy Reid level. Winning a Super Bowl would put him in that category as well. And I think it's fair to mention that Reid was Kyle Shanahan, 12, 15 years ago. The guy who went to the Super Bowl, always had great offenses, maybe didn't have the greatest quarterback to sort of, seal the deal. But now look at him. I mean, he found that quarterback, and I don't know if you would choose anyone else in this league over Andy Reid to be your head coach.
One last question. I've always wanted to ask this. How much influence and how involved is Mike Shanahan in things? Because I have heard that Mike is getting practice film, that he's getting film of meetings. How big is Mike's influence now with the 49ers?
He's around a lot, and so you would think that the influence is big. I've delved into that in the past, and I've gotten a strong reaction from Kyle Shanahan that Mike is here. Mike is a grandfather. He wants to be around his family as much as possible, but Mike Shanahan has no role in this organization. I'm running the show. We have assistant coaches. So it was a strong reaction. Sometimes when you get a strong reaction, you feel like, oh, maybe it's a little closer to the truth than I thought. This was during the draft process for Trey Lance when I was doing a story about that process, and I called Mike Shanahan, and he picked up in Kyle's office, which made me think that okay, this guy is like right here. He's he's not in the war room, but he's as close as you can get. But that was very strenuously shot down by Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. So
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure
there's some smoke there.
Yes, I'm sure it's frustrating for Kyle, right? Because he's probably spent so much of his career trying to distance himself from being Mike Shanahan's son that I could understand sensitivity. But from the things I've heard, it sounds like he's pretty involved, and I'm always interested in who has Shanahan's ear, especially
for sure. And I mean, he reveres his father. I mean, absolutely, from jump, since he was a little boy, and still does today. And Mike Shanahan has been through all this before, so he's a great resource to have. Kyle does have a fantastic resource on his own staff in Bobby Turner, who was there for all the Mike Shanahan years in Denver. So he's got some veteran guys whose ears he can bend if he needs to.
Go check out all of Matt's work at The Athletic. It is absolutely some of the best 49ers information you can get anywhere. Matt, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you for having me. All right.